Now that the waters have calmed, the nostalgia has worn off, and the sweet taste of Kool-Aid is gone, what do we really think of The Force Awakens? More importantly, what is the state of Star Wars today? How has it changed? Has Disney lifted the burden of angry fans from George Lucas's shoulders?
Please welcome none other, my Yoda, George Lucas.
When George Lucas went into production with the prequels, he didn't want to make the same film. Each of his movies were aimed to be different, which I find commendable. The thought of a crumbling democracy that's reflective of human history, a needless war, planets that were unlike anything we have ever seen in Star Wars before, these were wonderful ideas, but their execution was dreadful due to a lack of energy that made Star Wars so exciting in the first place. I could go into detail as to why the prequels didn't work for me, but really everyone has examined it to death already. It was a film that missed its mark for greatness. If it had a stronger screenplay, some better acting, plot twists or motivations we didn't see coming which could have kept the audience engaged, Lucas's vision for the prequels would have been stunning. I feel almost sure of it. The new worlds of episodes 1 through 3 were wonderfully original, but their failure to engage a mass audience tragically left a burning mark on the franchise and Mr. Lucas. Attempting to leave a positive legacy behind, George gave the keys to Disney. It was now up to Kathleen Kennedy, along with Disney, to at last deliver the long-awaited sequel trilogy to the original films. After 32 years of anticipation, audiences were finally going to find out what happened to Han, Luke, Chewie, and Leia. George Lucas was to be on as a creative consultant. With the audience's practical disgust with Lucas, Disney only wanted the Star Wars license, not his ideas.
They looked at the stories and they said, we want to make something for the fans.
George didn't want that, however. He left Disney and Star Wars on bitter terms, feeling ready to let go.
They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway, but at the same time I said, I'm not going to, if I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So, and I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all I would do is muck everything up.
Academy Award-winning screenwriter for Little Miss Sunshine, Michael Arndt, was assigned onto Episode 7 to pen the script. Arndt worked with Disney, or rather Pixar, before on Toy Story 3. He seems like the perfect man for the job. Unfortunately, he was fired as it would take him far too long for Disney's deadline to produce a script. According to multiple sources, Arndt's screenplay would have been much in line with what George Lucas wanted to do with the new sequels.
I said all I wanted to do was tell a story of what happened. You know, it started here and it went there, and it's all about generations, and it's about, you know, the issues of fathers and sons and grandfathers, and it's a family soap opera.
In a last-minute change, Disney hired Lawrence Kasdan, the writer of The Empire Strikes Back, to take Mr. Arndt's place, along with J.J. Abrams. The two only had mere months to produce a screenplay for one of the most anticipated sequels of all time. With George Lucas entirely gone, we were finally going to see a sequel that was 32 years in the making. Star Wars was back, and audiences were pumped. In its opening weekend, The Force Awakens made $247 million, meaning its production budget. In the months to come, The Force Awakens made a total of $1,131 million in the foreign markets, and $2 trillion overall. The film also gathered a plethora of positive reviews. For once in a long time, audiences were cheering again during a Star Wars film. All seems right again in the universe. until the fans started flooding the internet.
Most of the negative feelings towards J.J. Abrams' new installment in the classic franchise, they have to do with comparing it to the original trilogy.
So The Force Awakens is a $100 million Star Wars fan fiction film. It felt like that. And that's how bad the writing was.
It was honestly what? It was like episode 4. It was the same thing over again.
The Force Awakens was accused of being a mere rehash, a film that simply ripped off A New Hope in order to sell toys. Even I got a large amount of hatred for liking the film. So, was The Force Awakens a mere retread of the original trilogy? Or was it a true continuation of the saga? To me, it's a little bit of both. In one way, it was a fantastic accomplishment, and in another way, it was a boring failure. Looking at the positive aspects of the picture, Episode 7 was an enjoyable, competent movie that served the basic needs a commercial film should provide that I felt were missing in the prequels.
There's always a bigger fish.
With episodes 1 through 3's mostly abominable acting, basic cinematography, and unlikable protagonist, Disney sought out to make the anti-prequel sequel, so full of subtle middle fingers to George Lucas, it would make any 40-year-old fanboy blush at the time.
Real sets, practical effects.
You've been here, but you don't know this story.
Nothing's changed, really. I mean, everything's changed, but nothing's changed. That's the way you want it to be, really.
Where the prequels lacked energy,
Another happy landing.
The Force Awakens was blistering with it.
Compressor.
Starting with his performances and characters, Daisy Ridley as Rey provided the way to a character who had immeasurable, although admittedly too much strength for the series' new lead.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
I will remove these restraints and leave the cell with the door open.
Ridley's performance displayed anger, independence, confidence, and vulnerability. Oscar Isaac as Poe made for a kind-hearted, likable ace pilot. Adam Driver as Kylo Ren made a believable, vulnerable villain, even if a little too vulnerable.
You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
John Boyega provided some good comic relief as Finn, although they really needed to develop his character more. Why does he leave the First Order if he was trained by them his whole life? Didn't he grow up with these stormtroopers? Now he's okay with simply killing them 10 minutes into the film?
Did you see that?
Although these new characters were archetypes of the same characters from the original trilogy, with Rey being like Luke, Poe as a less cynical Han Solo, Maz Kanata being an elder wise man like Yoda, and BB-8 as the series' new R2-D2, these were characters I could care for. Although I didn't see Finn's purpose at all, other than bringing Rey out of Tatooine. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean Jakku.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
I would go as far as to say that the whole first half of The Force Awakens was his strongest, since it focused on its new characters, who I was sold by. They provided a layer of depth in their performances that was missing even in the original trilogy.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Governor Tarkin, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
Other strengths attributing to The Force Awakens was its proper usage of old characters, instead of horseshoeing them into the story or giving them some disgraceful cameo roles like some other films do.
Scarif? They're going to Scarif? Why does nobody ever tell me anything, Artu?
They were actually integral to the story. Seeing Luke at the end was the money shot of the film, making us wonder where Episode 8 will go, instead of having us leave the theater scratching our heads, feeling underwhelmed like episodes 1 and 2 did. In my opinion, The Force Awakens didn't go too far down the nostalgia rabbit hole. Yeah, there are similarities to A New Hope that borders on lazy. Don't even get me started on the new Death Star that was merely destroyed in one film, providing absolutely no weight to the picture whatsoever. The only thing it was useful for was when it metaphorically blew up the prequels by destroying Coruscant. Bye-bye, politics! With this said, there is a glaring flaw with The Force Awakens. It feels the same. Episode 7 felt like it was rushed through the door. After 32 years since the original trilogy, this was the best they could do? A soft reboot?
I got a bad feeling about this.
If the film's original screenwriter, Michael Arndt, wasn't under the gun by Disney to get the script finished on time, I keep imagining how incredible Episode 7 could have been. Only fragments of Lucas's original ideas that Michael Arndt adapted are perhaps in the picture, but one can't know for sure what stayed and what didn't, if anything at all. His ideas, for all we know, could have been dumped in the trash compactor.
Is there a garbage chute? Trash compactor?
It would make sense considering how George described Disney's ownership of the license.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
Okay, but the result ended in a return to form, but wildly disappointing sequel that had 32 years of anticipation behind it.
She at one time said, would you consider playing an Obi-Wan type character handing Excalibur down to the next generation? I said, when would that be? And at the time he said around 2011.
With the lazy filmmaking of the prequels, mixed with the legendary status of the originals, the bar was both extremely low and astronomically high for the new film. To look at it on one end of the spectrum, The Force Awakens had to just be a fun film that embodied the feelings of the originals. Pretty much, they just had to not be the prequels in any sort of way. Well, mission accomplished. The other side of the coin is that with a 32-year gap, the story could have gone anywhere. This was the chance to make a stunningly new, true continuation of the saga that would feel familiar, but also bold, something fresh, a sequel that fans always dreamed of. Instead, audiences were given a regurgitated, predictable story that did very little to evolve the world to new thrilling heights, leaving many fans frustrated with more questions than answers. The film left me with questions that made me curious story-wise regarding why this new trilogy even exists in the first place. Why is there a resistance? Didn't the rebels win? What are they resisting? Why is the First Order, technically the Empire, still around? These queries make this long-awaited trilogy feel like an open contractual obligation. Fans wanted the old Star Wars back. For that, Disney delivered, making a film that yearns at the past, works for that and only that film. I enjoyed The Force Awakens as a fan, but as a cinephile, it's very clear that Disney made a film that ditched greatness in favor of making box office returns. The film business is a business, after all. My biggest concern with the new trilogy is that Episode 8 will be a rehash of The Empire Strikes Back. Hopefully, we don't get a plot where Luke trains Rey while Rey grows impatient, Finn and Poe venture to a city-based planet where they get betrayed, and the film ends with Rey where she has a Darth Vader-like encounter with Snoke. Let's also not forget If it's like Empire Strikes Back, there will be a big plot twist in the end for the sake of having a mid-trilogy twist.
Some of the stuff that happens, people are going to be like, oh my god.
Even though I think I know it all, they throw things at me story-wise I never could have imagined.
If I see a plot like that, I'll hurl my Yoda Slippy Cup right at the screen. Luckily, Episode 8's Rian Johnson is a director best known for his originality. His debut feature, Brick, combined a coming-of-age story with the dialogue of a Humphrey Bogart film. His next film, Looper, made a time-travel genre film in a grounded spy versus spy thriller setting, where the spy's enemy is literally his future self. J.J. Abrams is the director best known for kicking franchises into gear, with Mission Impossible, Star Trek, which was more like Star Wars, and of course Star Wars itself. Abrams is the director that presents his audience with familiarity, while Johnson, on the other hand, likes to take his audience on an unpredictable ride. But now there's a true concern for Star Wars: oversaturation. Star Wars used to be special because it was a generational event, something that would only come out once in a lifetime. Whether a good film or bad film, they were special. They were movies that were made once in a while, with a 2 to 3 year gap between trilogy sequels. Now, Star Wars is out with a new film every single year, whether it be a direct sequel or a needless spin-off about getting the plans to the Death Star.
They all have their own stories. They're all disconnected a little bit in some way. And that's what's interesting in watching how this band of rebels actually begins to come together.
A prequel about the young Han Solo or Jabba the Hutt, or Rian Johnson's own trilogy with brand new characters, Disney has turned Star Wars into Marvel. Before we know it, there will be 20 Star Wars films made by Disney that have the same familiarity as a Marvel picture. They will be films that are mere shells of what was once special. Disney seems to have been in panic mode with reshooting most of Rogue One, firing Han Solo spin-off directors Phil Lord and Christopher Miller when the film was almost wrapped with production, only to be replaced by Ron Howard, who will reshoot most of the film, and lastly, replacing Episode 9 director Colin Trevorrow so J.J. Abrams can close out the trilogy. All of these are pointing towards signs that Disney wants to use their formula, their Marvel structure, if you will. If you don't play ball with Disney, you get canned. Perhaps some of these firing decisions were good. I didn't like hearing the direction that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were taking with Han Solo at all, by comparing it to Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I also really didn't care for Colin Trevorrow's Jurassic World. CGI, it's no longer impressive. As ironically, I felt like it was a rehash. But wouldn't hiring Abrams to finish out the trilogy with Episode 9 kind of be a rehash? The last time he made a sequel to his own reboot, he did Star Trek Into Darkness, which was a remake of The Wrath of Khan. Is Disney entirely at fault for what Star Wars is becoming today, however? Perhaps we created this beast ourselves. We begged for more Star Wars, and we'd always get it, but we'd be dissatisfied with it. When the prequels were released, not only were fans, including myself, displeased, but wanted to lynch George Lucas. When Disney bought Star Wars, the movie-going public sighed out loud, "Thank God he's gone."
I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies.
Now fans are saying, Star Wars is ruined. It's just the same. George Lucas was a brilliant auteur. The prequels were actually fantastic.
There's a Star Wars theory going around that, bear with me, means the prequels are actually masterpieces.
It's so over the top.
It may be just me, but I think Star Wars has become something that we overanalyze. According to George Lucas, it was supposed to be just a movie for kids.
It's hard for people to realize, and I'm not supposed to say this
and I wasn't supposed to say it then, but, you know, it's a film for 12-year-olds. That's...
If anything, The Force Awakens was the most basic film one could make to bring together all generations of fans. It was a simple film with a simple plot that is so culturally relevant, nobody has a general consensus on the picture. Either you're a blind, mouth-breathing fanboy or an old bitter who can't enjoy anything. Maybe we just need to enjoy some things for as simple as they are. Star Wars is not ruined or dead. It's in purgatory. If fans beg for something different, it can be different. If we pay for more of the same, we'll get more of the same. I must admit, however, with the Star Wars film releasing every subsequent year, I have never felt less excited for each sequel. Where does the buck stop? When do fans say they are burnt out? So far, we haven't seen that. I hope for the best, but don't want to see something like another sequel trilogy. There is no clear answer as to what I want to see happen with Star Wars. I'm glad it's in new hands, but I'm also saddened that it's no longer extraordinary. I wish I could end this video on a clear note, rather than an ambiguous one, but sometimes that's just the way life is in this galaxy. Thank you, and may the Force be with you.